It was 1925 local time on the 16th of January 2020 at London Luton Airport in the United Kingdom. Luton is the fourth largest airport in London, serving 16 million passengers a year. A Wizzair A321 aircraft lined up via intersection Alpha on runway 26, which has now become runway 25. What happened next must have been a surprise to the flight crew. The investigation report does not state the airline, but the aircraft registration Golf Whiskey Uniform Kilo Golf is registered to Wizzair. The flight crew consisted of two pilots, a captain aged 32 with 8,305 total hours with a considerable 5,175 on this aircraft type, the A321. He was assisted by a co-pilot who would be flying the takeoff leg. On board were 5 cabin crew and 157 passengers. On this day, it was windy with light rain. The surface wind was 180 degrees 13 knots, gusting 24 knots, with a QNH of 1008. This was a flight from London to Prague. There had been a late change of aircraft from the smaller A320 with a capacity of about 180 to 186 to the A321, which has a capacity of about 230. Despite the change of aircraft, the seat allocation had already been given to the passengers in anticipation of it being an A320. When it was changed to the A321, the seat allocation was not changed. This, as you will see, will turn out to be significant. Prior to departure, the crew had calculated the takeoff speed with V1 at 112 knots and V2 at 123 knots, which is relatively low, but not surprising due to the load. It was a flex takeoff, which means that full power was not required, as this would also save on engine wear. As the plane thundered down the runway, the captain, who was the pilot monitoring, called out the V1 speed and shortly thereafter called rotate. This is when the co-pilot, the pilot flying, is supposed to pull back on the side stick and the nose would lift up and the plane would be in the air climbing. On this occasion, when the captain called for rotate, the co-pilot put back on the side stick, but the plane did not take off. The co-pilot immediately told the captain that the plane was not lifting off the ground, but this must have been observed by the captain. The pilot flying then pulled the side stick back to almost full reflection, but again no rotation, as the plane remained on the runway. If the plane did not climb, it would soon run out of runway and end in disaster. The captain then selected toga thrust, which is the maximum power available, and the aircraft started to climb. This was quick thinking on the part of the captain, as there was simply not enough time to have any sort of discussion. With everything that was going on, after takeoff the captain forgot to say, "Positive rate, gear up," to which the pilot flying would have said, "Gear up." The landing gears were not retracted until about 5,000 feet. The crew can be excused for this with the shock that they must have just had. The crew decided to continue the flight and try to work out en route what the problem could have been. The senior cabin attendant informed the flight crew that there were no passengers in the rear section. Close to the top of descent, the crew came to the conclusion that the takeoff stabilizer settings on the load sheet were wrong, and that had caused the delayed rotation. The pilot did not realize that in reality the center of gravity was out of the limits of this plane. The real reason for the problem was how the aircraft was loaded. An A320 has 3 zones, A, B and C. The A321 has 4 zones, A, B, C and D. Since the seat allocation had not been changed when the aircraft was changed, it meant that passengers were boarding as if it was a smaller A320. So zones A, B and C were occupied, but zone D was empty. This meant that the plane was unbalanced. The flight crew had had no reason to go back to the cabin to look at how people were sitting, and the cabin crew, not being pilots, had and could not have been aware of the negative effects of having an unbalanced plane. Anyone who remembers their childhood knows that you need to have another child at the other end of a playground balancing beam. It was only afterwards that it was realized that the aircraft had been loaded incorrectly and outside of the permitted center of gravity window. The report recommended that ground and cabin crews should be made aware as to the implications of a change to an aircraft variant.